Alright, it's time to finish this motor. Let's put the head on.
All of the valve guides have been replaced. That's something your machine shop will do. You'll order the guides for them because it's generally cheaper to get them from a Land Rover supplier. And they will press the old ones out, press the new ones in, and ream them to fit the valves. If we flip over, the head has been skimmed. Don't worry about some of the staining, that's from me. I put it down on a piece of cloth, and apparently the dye in the cloth wasn't very solvent resistant, and the dye stained the cast iron. But it's perfectly smooth, so it's not going to cause a problem. And as you can see, I got the machine shop to add hardened or stainless steel valve seat inserts. The original valve seats were cut directly into the cast iron head, and you're probably aware that in the past, when this motor was built, there was lead added to petrol, and that was partly to cushion the valves hitting the valve seats. And the theory, at least, is that plain cast iron valve seats are damaged by running unleaded fuel. That's not something I've ever personally worried about, but since we're here anyway, I got the machine shop to put new hardened valve seats in. The other thing, you do not want to be tightening your head bolts down onto paint. So if you paint your head, you need to mask or somehow remove the paint from the edge of the bolt holes. And I made up a bunch of 3D printed plugs to make that a little easier. In hindsight, I wish I made a lot of them for all of the small bolts on the outside of the motor as well, just to save chipping some paint. But that's okay. And same with the spark plug threads. I can't remember what these were, they were just something I had lying around. Actually, those ones didn't work so well. I might just quickly clean that up with a wire brush. The other slightly odd issue I had with this particular head is that I had to put thread inserts into 8 of these holes. It was a little odd. They weren't stripped. The threads were corroded. They were kind of corroded back on the inside, not on the edge, as if water had been trapped in there. So I'm not sure what happened with these. People do weird things. Who knows? In any case, all of the damaged threads have been repaired with thread inserts now, 5/16, the original size, so they are good to go. All right, there isn't actually that much for us to do on the head. All we have to do is put the valves in and then put the head on the motor. Now, the valves, as mentioned, are new, and the machine shop have fitted these and lapped them in for us. They do that anyway as part of fitting the seats and the guides and all of that. And they put a suction cup thing over each inlet or exhaust to pull against the valve and check that it's seating properly, so it's airtight. So yeah, we're not going to be doing the whole stick with a suction cup and grinding paste thing. All we have to make sure we do is put the valves in the correct location where they had them, so they seat properly. So, some oil. Put some directly in the guide as well, and on the seat, just for assembly. And there we go. Now we try and turn this around so you can see. So here's our valve sticking out. And before I forget, we need to put a seal on it. And you get these seals in your gasket kit. And the inlet and exhaust are different for different sized valve stems, although it's very difficult to see a difference in the size of the actual seal. In fact, there may not be one. But if you look on the sides, see that smooth? If we grab one of the exhaust valves, you can see there's a rib all the way around. Inlet, exhaust.
Yes, I'm aware that I put the wrong seal on literally seconds after stating which way round they're supposed to be used. Don't worry, I'll change them later.
There it goes. And this is where things get a little bit annoying in a sort of you need 3 hands kind of way. So we've got the spring. It sits here. Then we have this washer thingamajig. And then these small collets hold all of this down. If you look here, you can see there's a groove in the end of the valve. So these small collets fit into that groove. Here, let me show you. If we put this on without the spring, and if we can get the collets to sit there, and you will see now this washer thing can't come off. So all we have to do is put it together whilst wrestling with the spring compressor. Okay, there we go. That was pretty coordinated, I must say.
And have a close look and make sure the collets are seated properly. Sometimes they can get jammed up and not lock into the groove on the valve stem.
Let's take a soft hammer, give it a little bounce, and that's it. Just got to do the other 7. And by the way, I don't think it matters which way the springs go on, but because these ones came off this motor, you can see that this retaining cap has a step in it, so the inside spring is pushed down on this side and flush on this side. I think if you did it backwards, it would just, sort itself out, but it's a little easier to do it the way it came off. Okay, it's that awful job done. I say awful, but it's not too bad. It's just the spring compressors can be a little annoying. Time to put it on the motor, I guess. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is put a little more of this sticky oil in the cylinders. Last chance to make sure everything's well lubricated for startup. Just note, no gloves. At this point you really want to be able to feel any grit. And yes, this is going to cause the motor to smoke like crazy when it first fires, but that's happy smoke. And the gasket surface needs to be clean, oil-free. So I'm just using some brake clean. Although I think if you're using a copper gasket, you're supposed to put oil on it. No idea why you would be doing that in this century, but if you are, I think you use oil. Could be wrong about that. And then bare hand test. Make sure that it's all nice and smooth. Okay. Here comes the head gasket. Now, this head gasket can only go on one way. The service manual says to put it on with the word petrol facing upwards, which is fine, except most of these new ones don't say anything. And, as you can see, it pretty much flips over, but not exactly. See these 2 small holes here at the back of the motor? Okay, they're covered up. So this is wrong. This is right. These 2 holes are the difference. And final check. Make sure there is no oil in the bottom of any of the head bolt holes.
A bit of oil on the threads is fine. You just want to make sure that there's no puddle of oil or grease or anything like that in the bottom of the holes, or any blind threaded hole for that matter. Because oil can't compress, and if whatever oil is in the bottom of the hole can't fit into the space at the end of the bolt, you'll crack the block. So if ever a bolt going into a blind hole starts to feel spongy or rubbery, stop. That's what it feels like right before something goes pop.
And then same thing for the surface of the head. Just get all the oil off. Make sure it's nice and smooth. Now what I'm going to do is just plonk it face down on a fresh rag, and then just get our head bolts organised. Now to start with, I'm just going to drop a couple of the short ones in, and one long one at the back somewhere, and that's how we're going to locate the head. Now there are clever ways we can do this. One thing people do is they use a couple of old head bolts, cut the head off, and then thread a couple of them in somewhere so they act as alignment dowels. So you slide the head over the shank of the bolt and then pull them out afterwards and put your proper head bolts in. I'm not going to do that because I don't have a couple of spare head bolts, and I've never done it that way. I've just plonked it on, so that's what we're going to do. And you will note that the head gasket is a fairly tight fit around the bolts. There's not a lot of room for movement there. In other words, if you drop the head on and all of your bolts start nicely, the head gasket is in the right place. All right, let's do it. Got my fingers caught. Okay. Okay. Yeah. It's pretty good. Okay, head bolts. There's obviously 2 of these and 1 of these missing because they're over on the motor. But otherwise, you've got your 5 longest bolts. These go on the inside through the rocker shaft feet bracket things. The smaller ones also hold down the rocker shaft. Then you've got your medium-sized ones, which go all around the outside, and the 4 smallest ones, which also go on the outside. And I'm going to oil all of the threads. And yes, oil does affect your torque settings, but in Land Rover land, all of the threads are assumed to be oiled. So that's what the torque settings are based on, okay? I'm also going to make sure we have some under the head. And in we go. Let's put a little oil on these 2 before I forget. And then wind all the bolts in, give them a little nip so that everything stays in place, but we're not torquing them down yet. We need to put the rocker shaft in first. Next to go in are the push rods. Now I've checked all of these by spinning them in the lathe. But if you don't have something like that, you can just... Yep. Looks nice and straight. A little bit of oil. So it doesn't go rusty really. I've got some of the thick Lucas stuff in here. So we'll just dip the end in that. Down into the hole. And you've just got to make sure that it seats properly in the slide that goes up and down in here. Number 2. And 8. And then some of this gloop into the top of each push rod. And some moly paste on the top of each valve. Now I didn't use this stuff on the push rods, top or bottom, because on either side there's a small oil gallery. You know, these are fed through a small hole in the rocker, so if we gloop a whole lot of this stuff in there, it might block up that hole. And I'm about to position the rocker shaft, so we'll just put a couple of bolts here ready. We do have a dowel here, and there's a dowel on the rocker shaft side for this hole. So once we position it, it should stay put. Just to clarify, there are 3 dowels. They may be stuck in your rocker posts or on the head. It just depends how things came apart. So just check that you're not mashing 2 of them together or anything silly like that. I've got the small bolts in place, just so they're there when we plop it on. And I'm going to use the rocker cover to put it in position, but it's easy enough to just manhandle it. The next thing I'm going to do, see our push rods? I put a big dollop of that sticky oil in there. Now, to stop us crushing anything on our way down, I'm just going to position the rockers in there, because what you really don't want to have happen is have one of these sitting something like this, and you don't notice, and you go to start tightening things down, and you'll bend the push rod or destroy the adjuster or something bad. And now looking at it from the other side, we've got our 3 dowels. We just want to make sure that this sort of nicely goes down over the dowels. Okay, so all of the dowels are safely going into their slots. Come through and double check all of the push rods. See, this one's come out. Just make sure that's nicely seated. So we can go the head bolts. And when we cinch these down, they're going to move some of these posts around a little bit, or they'll move the rocker shaft within the post. That's why we don't want to fully tighten these small bolts yet. All of our threads have started nicely. All of our dowels have located properly. Okay, so now we can start tightening everything down. Now this valve is being pressed down, and I think this one will be. So you need to make sure that you tighten things evenly so we don't bend the rocker shaft. Right, it's in. All of the open valves still have a lot of slop in them. And that's, at this point, the push rod could still fall out of position. So we'll take most of the slack out of them now. Okay, it's just to make sure that nothing can fall out of position. All right, now for pretty much the final operation as far as rebuilding the engine goes, torquing the head down. Here's the picture, 65 foot-pound. The sequence is basically from the inside working out. And we're not going to go straight to 65 foot-pound. We'll do it in stages, so probably, I don't know, 20, 45, and then 65. You don't want to do it in really small increments, like you don't want to go to 60 and then try and go to 65, because your torque wrench will just click. The torque wrench has to be moving to give you an accurate reading. Sorry, some of these were only finger tight, so I'm just giving them a little more nip before we start with real torque. Okay, 20 foot-pound. Okay, did we get them all? Now, what I am going to do now, so we've just torqued the main bolts down to 20, so I know that this rocker shaft is now completely seated. I'm just going to jump to these small bolts, and they need to be torqued to 18 foot-pound. So I might change torque wrenches. Hang on. Snap on! Okay. Going to call that 18 all round. The reason I did that is because 18 foot-pound is right at the very bottom of what this thing can do. And this being a clicky one, the only way you know you're at 18 is when it clicks. And if it doesn't click, you tear a bolt in half. Whereas on that old snap-on one, I can see the torque on the needle. Of course, the correct answer is to use a smaller torque wrench, but I don't have one. Okay, 45 foot-pound, is that what we're doing? Okay, and we'll just leave that for a few minutes, and then we'll go 65. Okay, 65, let's go. Okay, just make sure we didn't miss any. All right, it's done. And if you made it this far, congratulations, you've basically rebuilt the engine. I'll plonk this on for now, just to keep stuff out of the motor, but we won't be using this one. I need to find a better one, because I don't know what's going on here. This was probably British Leyland, 4:30 p.m. the day before a strike. But anyway, we'll get the motor pretty much plugged up right now. Let's start at the top here with spark plugs. These are NGK something, what are they? B6ES. Now the factory specified plug is a Champion NY12. Or for the 7-to-1, you use an N8. Now the N just refers to the thread, so we don't really have to worry about that. If it's right, it's right. What we're more interested in is the number in the middle, the 12 and the 8. That is the temperature range of the spark plug. And in Champion land, a bigger number equals more hot. So the high compression heads use a hotter spark plug than the low compression heads. Now, the reason I'm using NGK is because they were cheaper. Every brand of spark plug uses a completely different system, but there are plenty of cross-reference charts online, and if you cross-reference Champion 12 to NGK, you'll get a number 5. But I've chosen a number 6. In NGK world, bigger number equals cooler, so the spark plugs we are going with are one step cooler than the plugs Land Rover specified. Now, spark plug temperature has nothing to do with how powerful the spark is. What it's all about is how much insulation there is around the plug and how hot this stays in between sparks. The electrode of a spark plug needs to stay really hot so that carbon doesn't stick to it. In other words, it stays hot to keep itself clean. If it's too hot, however, it can pre-ignite the combustion chamber, which is bad. And obviously, if it's too cool, it'll just get sooted up and eventually misfire. Now, these motors are known for running on. That means you turn the car off and the engine keeps running by itself for a few seconds. I've never had an issue with these plugs fouling up, so I think we can afford to go one step cooler. In worst case, it'll just develop a misfire over time and we can put a hotter plug in. Anyway, let's quickly check the gap. What is it supposed to be? 30 thou. It is worth checking because sometimes these get dropped in the shop. I note that these NGK ones always come with a cardboard sleeve on the end to prevent that. The Champion ones do not, and I have purchased them where they've obviously been dropped in the box but dropped on the end and completely crushed the gap. But these are all going to be totally close enough. Okay, let's put them in. And you do not need to do spark plugs up tight. The torque on the box is 25 Newton meters, I think, which is not much. All right, let's spin it around because next we're going to work on the back. This is the back of the camshaft hole. Now we need to install the cover over here before we can install the oil line for the head. This is the cover and this is the gasket. And you can see that this is a thick cork gasket because the surface of the block is not machined. That's a rough finish. And I can immediately see an issue here. Our gasket does not have a cutout for the oil gallery nut. See, it should be like this. Anyway, easy fix. Now, these leak all the time, so you need to use compound. And what people tend to do, once these start leaking, people tighten these screws more and more, which bends this plate, and then it leaks more and more. So don't do that, just use some compound. Now I better go find some screws. And we'll just try, if possible, to make sure we have enough wriggle room so that if anyone ever needs to get this plug out, they can get a socket onto it. But I think it is what it is. And you don't want to over tighten these, we're just squashing the cork. Okay? Again, if you go too much, you just bend this plate. And now we can put on the oil feed pipe for the head. And these are new banjo bolts and washers. The little copper washers come in the head gasket kit, by the way. Now I'm going to have to take this back off again. This is the original pipe and it was in 95% good cosmetic condition. So rather than throw it, I put a layer of silver paint over it. And I've just now realized that the silver paint I used is in no way solvent proof. So I'm going to have to take this back off and repaint it, but I'll do that later. Anyway, we're not going to crush the washers down right now. We'll put it all on so it's there. These pipes are available brand new, by the way. I just thought it would be nicer to use the old one and save a little bit of money. Oh, and I should have emphasized, if you're reusing these, or in fact if they're new, make sure you clean them out really, really well, because here's another one, and you can see that tiny little hole there. That is the oil feed for your head. Next, we'll put the fuel pump and the backing plate on. And the gasket with the step in it goes here on this side. The plain gasket goes here on this side. And the two studs. These are the original ones. I haven't done anything to them except clean them. So that's nice for a change. Okay, fuel pump. We are going with a new fuel pump. All of these fuel pumps are labeled OEM, I think. I'm not sure who makes them. Country of origin, Turkey. And this paper gasket is the nice, modern, slightly rubbery type. I don't know how to describe it really. But this will seal fine without any compound. So we'll just put it on as is. Oh, we should put the gasket on first. And nylock nuts. Have we got one yellow nylock and one white nylock? That's not very professional. Okay, found another yellow one.
Now, this engine is actually wrong. Normally the oil fill tube goes here, although early Series 3 engines did come with a blanking plate instead, but they had the rocker cover with the extra hole for filling the engine with oil. And this all has to do with the CCV system, which I'm not going to get into right now, but what we've got here is wrong. Anyway, I'm going to put the blanking plate on for now just to seal the engine, but this may change depending on where the engine ends up going. Basically, there were 3 CCV options for this motor, and there's no point going out and finding the correct parts until I know which of those 3 options we're going to end up using.
Because I'm pretty confident that this will be coming off, I'm just smearing grease on this gasket so that it comes off nice and easy. It will still seal just fine if we want to run the engine like this. Okay, and now we should sit there nicely. Let's put the dipstick in, or the dipstick tube at least. I think I have a new one of those somewhere. So just put this in with a little bit of thread sealant. Now I just checked on another motor, and if we get this, about 135 I reckon I measured on this ruler. Measured just like that. We can adjust it later. Looks about perfect. We just needed clearance for the exhaust. And I assume in my collection of gasket kit parts we will have a new O-ring. This looks about right. That'll do. I don't know what I did with the clean dipstick. Anyway, I'll find that later. What else shall we do? Well, may as well get some of this water stuff off my workbench, I suppose. Thermostat housing. And I've probably got a thermostat somewhere. Let me go have a look. Country of origin, China. That's where the good stuff comes from. And there is a big O-ring that goes into here. And on it goes. And then our thermostat bolts. And I am using a little thread sealant on these threads because coolant tends to get down into them and then they rust in place. So we'll just put a little sealant on there which will back its way up to the top of the thread and hopefully stop water getting in. Now, one of these is longer than the other 2, and that is correct, and I'm not sure why. But I'm putting the long one at the front because it's a through hole, so there's no risk of bottoming anything out. Next, this little rubber hose. And yes, I need to put hose clamps on there. Now, this hole here is for this temperature sensor. And this is for the little light on your dashboard that says choke. And these little bitty screws are 2BA.
Alright, well that's about it for now. Obviously, there's a few external pieces still to go on, like the distributor, oil filter, manifolds. But we'll do that in the next episode when we get the engine set up to run. Because we are going to run this engine. It's not much fun building an engine if you're not going to fire it up. Off camera, I am going to swap out the different piston ring. I also saw a speck of carbon that I missed, so I'll sort all of that out before I see you next. And tidy up paint chips, stuff like that. And by the way, once we're done with it, this engine will be for sale, so if you're interested, you could get in touch now. New Zealand only. Now, I haven't worked out a price or anything yet, because I haven't worked out how much this cost, but engines are expensive. So what I'm saying is, I probably won't sell it for $500 in a box of Waikato. Also, if anyone wants me to rebuild their 2.25 litre engine, I am open to the idea. Anyway, apart from accessories, that's the engine rebuilt. Like I said, we're not done yet, so I will see you back here for firing this guy up. But for now, Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.